The Matthews townhouse stood on a cobblestone street, nestled in a quiet urban neighborhood that hummed with a mix of tradition and modernity. It was an old, charming building with ivy creeping up its brick facade, a bay window adorned with a glowing star ornament, and a brass knocker shaped like a lion's head. Inside, the house was filled with warm light, the smell of cinnamon, and the sound of laughter as the family prepared for their annual New Year's Eve celebration. The Matthews family was known for their strong bonds. David, the father, was a meticulous man in his late 40s, with salt and pepper hair and a stern demeanor that masked a deeply protective heart. His wife, Clara, was the opposite, a warm and vivacious woman who had a knack for storytelling, always captivating her children with tales of family traditions. Their 3 children, Jake, a stoic college sophomore, Maya, a bubbly high school senior, and Lily, an inquisitive 10-year-old with an insatiable curiosity, completed the picture of a loving family. Every year on New Year's Eve, the Matthews family followed the same routine. They would gather around the fireplace, share their hopes for the upcoming year, and indulge in Clara's homemade feast. But there was one peculiar tradition that had been passed down through generations: never open the door at midnight. Clara would always explain the rule in a hushed tone, her voice carrying an eerie weight. "This house has been in our family for over a century," she'd say, "and for as long as anyone can remember, the rule has protected us. At the stroke of midnight, something roams the streets, something that should never be let inside." The children used to find the rule thrilling, imagining ghosts or monsters lurking outside the door. But as they grew older, they began to dismiss it as a quirky family superstition, all except Lily, who felt a peculiar chill whenever her mother spoke of it. That New Year's Eve was no different. The family gathered around the dining table, laughing and teasing one another as the minutes ticked closer to midnight. Lily sat by the bay window, watching the snow fall in thick, silent flakes. The world outside seemed so peaceful, hardly a place where something sinister could be lurking. When the clock struck midnight, David stood and locked the front door with deliberate care. Clara drew the curtains, her movements brisk and purposeful. "Let's count down," Maya shouted, trying to lighten the mood. The family joined in, their voices rising in unison. 3, 2, 1, Happy New Year! Cheers erupted, glasses clinked, and Jake set off a small confetti cannon, sending shimmering bits of paper into the air. Amid the chaos, Lily's gaze drifted back to the door. It was barely a whisper at first, so faint Lily thought she imagined it, a knock at the door. 3 soft raps. She froze, her heart pounding. "Did anyone hear that?" she asked, her voice trembling. The room fell silent. David frowned and moved to the window, peeking through a gap in the curtains. "There's no one there," he said firmly. But the knock came again, louder this time. Clara paled, clutching her chest. "No one touches that door," she said, her voice uncharacteristically sharp. Lily's curiosity burned brighter than her fear. She had to know what was outside. While her family argued, she crept to the door, unlatched it, and cracked it open, just enough to peek outside. A gust of icy wind blew into the house, carrying with it a strange metallic scent. The street outside was empty, but something shifted in the shadows, a fleeting movement that made Lily's heart skip. Before she could think, the door slammed shut with a force that shook the walls. At first, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. The family scolded Lily, and she apologized profusely. They resumed their celebrations, albeit with a lingering tension in the air. But as the night wore on, subtle changes began to manifest. The temperature in the house dropped, no matter how high David turned up the thermostat. Strange noises echoed through the walls, whispers, faint and unintelligible, that seemed to come from nowhere. Clara's star ornament, a family heirloom that always hung in the bay window, shattered inexplicably. "It's just a coincidence," David said, his voice unconvincing. But Lily couldn't shake the feeling that she had let something in, something that was now watching them. Around 2 a.m., Jake went to the kitchen to grab a snack. He didn't come back. When David went to check on him, he found Jake standing in the middle of the kitchen, staring blankly at the open fridge. The light bathed his face in an unnatural glow. "Jake?" David called. Jake turned slowly, his eyes glassy and unfocused. "Did you hear it, Dad?" he whispered. "It's calling me." David shook him roughly, snapping him out of his trance. Jake seemed confused. Over the following days, the family learned the true horror of breaking the tradition. Each member began to experience vivid, terrifying dreams of past New Year's Eves in the townhouse, moments they couldn't have witnessed, but somehow felt real. Lily dreamt of a girl from decades ago opening the same door at midnight. The girl's face was eerily familiar, her expression frozen in terror as shadowy figures poured into the house. Clara dreamt of her grandmother weeping as she nailed the door shut one New Year's Eve, repeating, "It's the only way to keep them out." David began hearing his late father's voice in the middle of the night, warning him, "You've broken the line. It's too late now." As the family pieced together their experiences, they discovered old journals hidden in the attic, written by Clara's ancestors. The journals detailed how the tradition began, how the first Matthews family had made a pact with something unearthly to protect their home. The price of breaking the pact was unimaginable. The more they read, the more they realized the entity they had invited in wasn't just a random force. It was connected to their bloodline, drawn to their fears and weaknesses. One night, Lily woke to find Maya standing at the door, her hand on the latch. Maya turned to her with tears streaming down her face. "It says it can fix everything," she whispered. "It says it can undo what you did." The realization hit Lily like a thunderclap. The entity was manipulating them, preying on their guilt and desires. It had no intention of fixing anything. It wanted to consume them, one by one. As the entity's influence grew stronger, the family was pushed to their breaking point. The house became a battleground of flickering lights, shifting shadows, and whispered temptations. Each family member was forced to confront their deepest regrets and fears. Clara relived the night her mother died, realizing she had ignored her dying wish. David was haunted by the son he had lost before Jake was born. But it was Lily who faced the hardest trial. She saw herself as the girl from her dreams, opening the door and dooming her family. In the climactic moment, the family realized the only way to banish the entity was to sever the pact entirely, by burning the townhouse, their ancestral home, to the ground. It was a heartbreaking decision, but one they had to make together. As the flames consumed the house, the entity's screams echoed through the night. The family stood huddled together in the snow, watching their history burn away. But as dawn broke, they felt a strange sense of peace. For the first time, they were free. Months passed, and the Matthews family adjusted to their new lives. Their new home was a modest house in a different part of the city, far from the townhouse's haunted memories. The air was lighter, the walls free of whispers. But there was something unspoken that lingered in each of their hearts, a question that none of them dared voice. Was it truly over? Lily was the first to notice the oddities. It began with the smallest things. Her bedroom door would creak open at night, though she swore she had closed it. She'd hear faint footsteps outside her room, only to find the hallway empty. Once she woke to find her window wide open, though she had locked it before bed. At first, she didn't tell anyone. She didn't want to worry her parents, who already seemed strained. One evening, during a tense dinner, Lily finally blurted out what had been weighing on her. "The house wasn't the problem," she said, her voice trembling. "It was the door, and the door is still with us." The table fell silent. David shook his head. "Lily, that's enough. The house is gone. We're safe now." "But are we?" Jake said quietly, his eyes fixed on his plate. "I found something in the garage, a piece of the door. It shouldn't be here, but it is." Clara's face went pale. "We need to destroy it," she said, her voice trembling. "Whatever is left of that door, it has to go." Despite their decision to burn the fragment, the family couldn't find it the next morning. It had vanished from the garage, leaving behind only a faint scorch mark on the concrete floor. That night, the family was jolted awake by a loud banging sound. It came from the front door, the knocks echoing through the house like gunshots. David grabbed a baseball bat and approached the door, his heart pounding. "Who's there?" he demanded. There was no answer, only another knock, louder this time. Against Clara's protests, David flung the door open. No one was there. But when he turned back to close the door, his blood ran cold. Carved into the wood of their new front door were 3 words: "You let me in." The knocks became a nightly occurrence. Each time the family would gather in the living room, holding each other tightly as the banging grew more insistent. The whispers returned, louder now, filling the house with a cacophony of voices. One night, Maya broke down in tears. "It's punishing us," she sobbed. "It won't stop until we pay for what we did." "But we destroyed the house," Clara said, her voice cracking. "We ended the pact." "No," Jake said, his voice hollow. "We only destroyed its home. We didn't destroy it." Desperate for answers, Clara dug deeper into the journals they had salvaged from the townhouse. In one particularly worn volume, she found a passage that chilled her to the bone. "The door is not merely wood and nails. It is a threshold, a vessel for the unknown. To destroy it is to release what it contains. Only by closing the threshold can the balance be restored." The realization hit her like a blow. By burning the townhouse, they had unwittingly set the entity free. It was no longer bound to a place, it was bound to them. The family knew they had to act before the entity consumed them entirely. They decided to seek out the origins of the pact, tracing their ancestry back to the first Matthews family. Their search led them to an abandoned estate on the outskirts of the city, a crumbling mansion that had once belonged to their ancestors. There, they hoped to find the answers they needed to end the curse once and for all. But as they stepped through the mansion's threshold, they felt it, the oppressive presence of the entity, stronger than ever. And from the shadows, the door stood waiting. The mansion was a towering relic of the past, its windows shattered and its walls cloaked in ivy. A chill ran through Clara as she pushed open the creaking door. Dust hung thick in the air, and the scent of decay was overpowering. The place seemed frozen in time, as though it had been abandoned abruptly, its secrets left to rot in the dark. Jake carried a flashlight, its beam cutting through the gloom as the family ventured inside. The grand foyer was dominated by a sweeping staircase, its banister cracked and splintered. Portraits of stern-faced ancestors lined the walls, their eyes seeming to follow the Matthews family as they moved. "This is where it started," Clara whispered, clutching the journal to her chest. "Whatever happened here, it created the pact." Lily trailed behind, her small hand gripping Maya's tightly. She could feel the weight of the house pressing down on her, the air heavy with unspoken words and unseen eyes. As they explored the mansion, strange things began to happen. Footsteps echoed down empty hallways, doors creaked open and shut on their own, and the air grew colder with each passing moment. In one room, Clara found an old ledger filled with entries dating back centuries. Each entry detailed a family event, from births to deaths, but one page was different. It was torn and blackened, the ink smudged as though someone had tried to erase the words. "This is it," Clara said, running her fingers over the damaged page. "This is where the pact was made." "What does it say?" David asked, his voice tight. Clara shook her head. "I can't read it. The words are gone." As they examined the ledger, a sound like distant laughter echoed through the mansion. It wasn't joyous, it was mocking, filled with malice. They found the door in the basement. It was standing upright in the center of a cavernous room, completely unconnected to any walls or hinges. The door was blackened and charred, yet it pulsed faintly as though alive. "That's impossible," Jake whispered. "We burned it. I saw it burn." Clara stepped forward, her hand trembling as she held up the journal. "This is the threshold," she said. "This is what we have to close." Before anyone could stop her, Lily walked toward the door. Her expression was eerily calm, her eyes fixed on the faint glow emanating from its surface. "Lily!" David shouted, pulling her back. But as he touched her, the door responded. Its surface rippled like water, and a low growl emanated from within. Shadows began to pour out, swirling around the family like a storm. The shadows formed shapes, figures of people from the past, their faces twisted in pain. One of them stepped forward, a woman with hollow eyes and tattered clothes. She pointed at Clara. "You carry the blood," the figure rasped. "You carry the debt." "What debt?" Clara demanded. The figure gestured to the door. "Your ancestors sealed us here, trading our suffering for their safety. But you broke the seal. You set us free." Maya stepped forward, her voice shaking. "What do you want from us?" The woman's eyes burned with fury. "We want justice. We want what was taken from us, or we will take it from you." Clara realized what had to be done. The pact could not be undone, but it could be rewritten. She stepped toward the door, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her throat. "If we make a new deal," she said, "will you leave my family alone?" The shadows hissed and swirled, their voices overlapping in a cacophony. Finally, the woman spoke. "A new deal, but the price will be steep." "What price?" David asked, his hand tightening around Clara's arm. The woman's gaze fell on Lily. "The door requires a guardian, someone to watch over it to ensure it is never opened again. One of you must stay behind." The family froze. The weight of the demand was crushing. "I'll do it," Clara said, her voice breaking. "This started with my family. It's only right that it ends with me." "No!" David shouted. "We'll find another way." "There is no other way," Clara said firmly, tears streaming down her face. "If I don't do this, it will never end. The door will keep following us." Lily clung to her mother, sobbing. "Don't go, Mom. Please don't go." Clara knelt down, cupping Lily's face in her hands. "You're so brave, Lily, and so strong. You'll take care of everyone for me, won't you?" Lily nodded through her tears, her heart breaking. Clara approached the door, her steps heavy but resolute. The shadows parted for her, their whispers softening as though acknowledging her sacrifice. As she touched the door, it began to glow brighter, its surface solidifying. The shadows were drawn back into it, one by one, until the room was silent. Clara turned to her family one last time, her face illuminated by the door's light. "I love you," she said, her voice steady. "Always." The door closed with a deafening finality, and Clara was gone. The Matthews family returned home, their hearts heavy with grief, but filled with a sense of peace. The knocking stopped, the whispers ceased, and the house was finally theirs.